so I'm going to just start recording, and we'll post this somewhere on the website. So this is Mike Roy from Middlebury. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar. And what we're going to do today is we're going to keep it pretty simple. I'm joined here by Tony Zander, who is the CEO of SkillType, formerly known as LibDot. And maybe he'll touch on the name change in the course of the presentation. And he's going to talk some about LibDot, what it is, where it's going, and how it might be interesting to those of us who are thinking about collaboration within the Oberlin Group and beyond. And then we also invited Alexia Hudson-Ward to join us to talk some about why Oberlin decided to get involved with this project early on. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tony. So Tony, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mike. And it's nice to virtually meet everyone, some new names that I haven't met before. And also thanks to Alexia for joining us. Really exciting time to talk about SkillType, which, as Mike mentioned, we're currently going through a rebrand right now. The original name of this software platform was called LibDot, which was really constructed when we identified an opportunity to help libraries rethink the way talent management was performed. I'm going to come back to this, of course, but since that past sort of 15 months has taken place, we've gotten a lot of interest from IT departments at college campuses who do a lot of collaboration with the academic library, learning that apparently the needs that libraries face when it comes to recruitment and professional development and succession planning and partnerships across campus. IT departments are dealing with the same types of issues. And oftentimes staff who work in the library have some duties in the IT department and vice versa. And those lines are continuing to blur a bit, causing us to rethink the name LibDot, which obviously lib is a prefix for libraries, dot like dots on a graph. Over that past year, we've also learned a lot about how we plan to attack and solve this problem of talent management changing. And so we've developed a pretty clear theory of change now around skills. And we're going to talk about how we view skills as the opportunity for us to collaborate far more efficiently than we've been able to in the past. And so we're just going to power through this because I'd like to hopefully have a dialogue. And thanks for everyone for carving time out to join us today. And so I talked briefly about the notion that talent management is changing. This is not new information to us. I just want to sort of recap the angle that made us, sort of inspired us to start to tackle this issue. Firstly, the next generation of information professionals look and work a lot different. We see this in people that we manage. We see this through sort of social media trends and technology that's increasing different types of features and functionality that we have to learn today. You have a lot of born digital natives who are now matriculating into the workplace, who have different expectations around how work will be performed. Changes in the services that we're asked to provide as a library, as an IT department. These changes are taking place quite rapidly, but the skill development and the professional development of our teams is being outpaced by these changes. So there's an opportunity to upgrade the infrastructure that we acquire skills, that we train our staff to keep up with the pace of change of these new responsibilities that we have. And lastly, and Mike can speak to this quite personally, the lines between libraries and IT departments and offices of research are being blurred. The verdict is still out on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but the fact is that there's merged organizations and then there's even now unmerged organizations. And that was one of the reasons why I first reached out to Mike, was I noticed his role was pretty unique as a sort of director of a library and CIO at an institution. And I know that's no longer the case, but all of these reasons are sort of creating an opportunity for us to rethink the way we manage our talent which leads us to the next slide here around the future of collaboration. And so if we think about what the library and what our organizations will look like in the year 2030, they're going to look a lot different. They're going to work and function a lot different. And today we have economic reasons to increase the amount of we collaborate, right? And so a lot of the institutions that are even on this call are looking for opportunities to become more efficient, to share more amongst our trusted members. And we now have new tools to collaborate and communicate amongst ourselves that may not have been available to us when we first started these partnerships. Another theory of change we have is that the future of consortium won't be centered around sharing books and ILL and sharing purchases with large database vendors. We think there's going to be a growth in skill sharing. And if we need to hire someone, maybe we don't have to create a full-time role. Perhaps we can reach out to our network and create a really efficient way to leverage some talent that they have already. All right. So all this brings us to this conversation around SkillType. And I want to talk about the data model we've developed to bring this to fruition. And so on SkillType, a person creates a profile. And that profile has certain information about them, such as their demographics, their race and ethnicity, their gender, their location, and other personal demographics. Also, the skills that they have, the different types of things they are interested in learning, product experience, their preferences for work, and lastly, the things that the organizations they are affiliated with. Okay, this is a single user on SkillType, and so we crowdsource this information when people create a profile. And imagine a scenario where you have multiple users, right, who all belong to the same organization. They're all affiliated with, say, Oberlin College, okay? A group of users on LibDot comprises an organization, right? And so people who share an affiliation all belong to an organization, and all of that data that that person contributed now rolls up to that organizational view, okay? And so by virtue of me affiliating with Oberlin College, I now have a dashboard across all of my staff to see what are all the skills that we have in-house today. What are all of our staff members interested in? Okay. What product experience do we have across our staff? And our goal is to give you quick access to this information that's updated in real time before you make decisions such as creating a new committee to look for a job opening or create a new role. Perhaps you're evaluating a new software product and you just need to understand, do we have expertise in-house? So on and so forth. Now, one step further in our data model, you have an organization. And so we draw a clear distinction between organizations and people, right? And so organizations have their own set of data, and regardless of any person who's affiliated with that organization, that entity still exists, okay? And so in theory, everyone who's working at Oberlin College today may not be working there in 10 years. And so that organization exists as its own entity in our data model. And Oberlin College has its own demographics, such as the location it's in, and the racial breakdown and ethnic breakdown of the population that it serves, and what teams are within the organization. And we'll talk about what we mean by a team, the different departments that are there. Strategic directions that Oberlin College has. These are data points that exist outside of any individual person who works for this organization that are owned by that organization. The inventory, the products and services that Oberlin subscribes to and purchases, policies that are there. And lastly, affiliations that Oberlin College has, like with the Oberlin Group. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so these are pieces of data that belong to that organization. And if we go last step further in our data model, These are networks on SkillType, okay? So you look at a group of organizations who may share a common affiliation, okay? So you look at Oberlin and Middlebury and Colgate and Williams and so on and so forth, who are all members of the Oberlin Group. What that means is, from an Oberlin Group perspective on SkillType, the Oberlin Group can have access to a dashboard that looks at all of that data from those organizations rolled up to that network view. Why? By virtue of that shared affiliation, okay? And so the slide you're looking at now is sort of the last step in our data model that looks at what happens when several organizations share an affiliation, okay? And so the Oberlin Group will be its own entity on SkillType, and it has its demographics, its teams, its strategic directions. Perhaps as a consortium, you purchase inventory, that those subscriptions are managed at the consortial level. You may have your own policies, and you may have your own affiliations. We haven't gone that far yet, but perhaps you're a member of iCulc. But you can start to get the idea that the data model supports this parent-child relationship so that you can have purview across data across your members in order to make more strategic decisions. Now, I'm going to pause here to see if we have any questions, because it's important to wrap our heads around the data model before we go a bit further.
So I think for folks who are attendees, I believe the way, if you want to ask a question, you can use the chat room. And so I've set that's all set up. So if you have questions, you can type in there. What I'm thinking we'll do is, when we're done with the presentation side, it may turn out to be complete chaos, but I'll promote everybody to be a presenter, and so we can have the kind of Hollywood Squares thing. But I think there's too many folks to unleash that quite yet. So if you have questions, just throw them into the chat room.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me power through. Thanks, Mike. So just to summarize how this looks from a data perspective, we are implementing our own linked data model. And we are recognizing all of the different types of objects across our ecosystem in academic libraries and IT departments. So you have products and services, you have people, you have organizations, and there are relationships across all these different objects. SkillType is mapping these relationships that we leverage day to day, but our technology is going to allow you to leverage them in a far more efficient manner. Okay? So next step is vocabularies, because we describe these terms in our community in very different ways historically. One of our first challenges we tackled last year was to say, okay, we need to start to share terms and use like terms for talking about these things that we discuss on listservs and at conferences and on phone calls. And so we've gotten feedback that one of the sort of most exciting things we're developing is a shared vocabularies that are controlled, that are machine readable, that can be leveraged for greater collaboration. And so to start, we started to work from a lot of the controlled vocabularies, a lot of the core competency frameworks that exist. So ALA, for example, has its own core competency list for what it takes to be a librarian. And that was, I think the last version was developed in 2009. And we've sort of merged that and deduped that with more up-to-date competency frameworks from SLA, for example, has 2. We've taken 3 that exist from LIDA. ACRL has 1 as well that we've incorporated. And right now we have about 160 different skills that a user can describe themselves with. And this also forms our interests vocabulary. So skills and interests come from the same vocabulary. The distinction is a skill is something that a person is comfortable performing at work today. You can be assigned a task and you have the competency to accomplish this task, whereas an interest is something you want to record and you want your manager to be aware of. But perhaps you're looking for some professional development here. Perhaps you want some certification training here. It's important information to allow organizations to deploy their professional development budget in a more strategic way. So just to have a pulse on what our staff is interested in, and if we see that 20 people are interested in learning Tableau, instead of paying for each of them to go to a course, we can perhaps bring a trainer in to do a session for all 20 people. And so this type of data, we hope, when it rolls up to perhaps even the consortial level, for the Oberlin group to say, wow, across our membership, we have a lot of people interested in the following topics. Perhaps we can roll out some professional development training opportunities for all of our consortial members. Okay, so the next vocabulary is around inventory. And so I'm going to start to speed through these now that you have the idea, because I want to do a demo for you. And so, but we are scaling up. We don't have 23,000 right now, but there's going to be a point where every possible product or service that you purchase or subscribe to will be on SkillType. And we're collecting this data from a talent management perspective. And so when you create a new role or a project for someone to complete within your organization, some of the criteria for experience you can list is this individual must have experience with these products. Or we're looking for someone who has implemented Ex Libris Alma or OCLC Green Glass or any of these products and services. And so as a result, we created a vocabulary that can be leveraged across these different opportunities. Mm-hmm. This one is the most exciting to me, which is strategic directions. And so we've studied over 300 strategic plans from ARL members, you on this call and Oberlin Group members, even some other R2 and R3 institutions, to understand, are there a core set of strategic directions that an organization can possibly have? And we've concluded that there's about 50 of them. And so each of you may have 5 to 10 of these strategic directions if you have a strategic plan within your organization. And we've extrapolated them so that when you sign up for a SkillType profile, you can say, hey, we have these following 7 strategic directions. And what that allows us to do is to recommend other organizations who may share the same strategic directions you have, which creates more opportunities for collaboration. But secondly, it also allows us to allow your staff members to align themselves with a discrete strategic direction. And so when a person affiliates with your organization on SkillType, they're able to say, I contribute to these 2 strategic directions within my day-to-day work. And so when you look across your org chart, you should be able to see who's helping us accomplish the following strategic directions. And we're really excited about the potential for becoming more machine readable with this type of information. And lastly, teams. And so within your organization, at that university level or college level, we've already have a use case in our community where an IT department and a library system want to collaborate, but they're separate entities, right? And so our data model recognizes that, say, for instance, at Wayne State University, you may have different departments or teams within that university who want to remain separate, but also want to collaborate. And so when you sign up for SkillType, if you're a member of the college or that parent institution, you can then say, yes, but these people belong to this team. And so there's sort of different levels of collaboration that we're trying to design for within the organization. Okay. So before we get to a demo, I want to talk about some of the use cases here. So we've talked about people creating profiles on SkillType. That's that first column on the left. We've talked about organizations, and we've also described networks. Okay, so there are several use cases of why someone would want to use SkillType, and the more we work with our partners, the more use cases we identify, right? But since this is an Oberlin Group presentation, you can look sort of on the right-hand column there at the bottom square, and you'll start to see some of the types of things we hope to help you accomplish through this technology. And so to be able to see insights across the membership, such as who owns what products, who has which skills in-house, who's focused on which strategic directions. These are conversations you're having today on email listservs and on phone calls and at committee meetings. We want this information to be within a click of a fingertip for you, and for it to be real-time updated across your membership. Shared training. The opportunity that excited Mike a bit was around shared labor, because he told me about his Mellon-funded project a year or two ago called the Digital Liberal Arts Exchange, where different institutions work together to design a model to share digital humanities skills. But it's a really difficult thing to do without the technological infrastructure. It's very manual and creates a lot of work. And so we're inspired by those types of projects because these are the types of things we want to make more within reach. Okay, so where are we today in terms of developing this? Where are we right now? And so we've been working on SkillType for about 15 months, and we're excited this month to release the first production-ready version to our partners, which is, you see on that left-hand column. This allows individuals, like everyone on this call, to create a SkillType profile, to start to manage your skills, your experience. I'm going to demo this for you in a moment. And we wouldn't have been able to accomplish this without the support, financial support from organizations like Oberlin and others around the country. And we now are heads down focused on this second column, which we're on track to deliver by New Year's, which is what happens when a group of individuals are affiliated with the same organization? What is that organizational experience like? I'm going to show you mock-ups for this, but we're in the process right now of building this out as we speak. Now, my last point here before the demo is on the right-hand column, we've already identified the use cases for a consortium to use SkillType, but we haven't even started to work on this yet. We are trying to identify some strategic partners to help us design this and to bring this to life. And so that's sort of the premise for us approaching the Oberlin Group is if you see some utility in this type of technology, you are able to take a leadership position to help us design this. But we're also in conversations with other consortia as well to help share the burden of this cost. But our main focus for 2019 is to enable networks of libraries to do their work more efficiently using our technology. Okay. So please write down questions or enter them into the chat box. I want to jump into a demo now to show you SkillType in action. Is that okay?
Go for it.
So I'm going to do two things here. The first is I'm going to show you mock-ups of what we're developing, and then I'm going to switch to my browser and show you what's there today. A month ago, we went through a large infrastructure overhaul off of a WordPress instance that we developed that we basically broke WordPress. I'm gonna show that to you, but we were no longer developing it. And this month we are releasing our own from the ground up mobile ready industry grade app. And the front end is built in React, for those of you familiar with what Facebook is developed in. All of our backend is developed through APIs, and so I'm gonna show that to you right now. And so before I do that, let me do this. I'm gonna jump to, I'm in my web browser, and pardon the old name, but I said, it used to be called libdot, and I'm going to log into our labs, and then you'll notice the difference here. And so for the past year, to prove out our data model, we worked with some libraries primarily, but also just to wrap our head around the relationship between these products and organizations and people. And so what you're looking at now is our old platform, but it communicates the relationship between these different types of objects in our data model. And so along the left here, you can see all the different types of objects. You can see libraries, for example. You can see different products. Like, I think we had about 100 different products in this prototype. You can see different vendors. Those are organizations as well. And you can also sort by different types of products and services as well. So say you were looking for a library services platform. You wanted to see more information about a specific libdot or a specific object. And so on this product, you can see that the following institutions are using this product, like Gonzaga and Boston College and Brandeis. Now, these aren't just links. These are actual objects on our graph. And so if you click on one like Brandeis, for example, you'll jump over, and this is what an organization looked like. And the organization had certain affiliations. And so Brandeis belongs to the Boston Library Consortium. They also are a member of CNI. You can also see the different products and services that they use. And this prototype allowed us to work through a lot of the questions we had around the relationships between and among these objects. And so the Boston Library Consortium is a consortium. You can start to see how they had their own inventory, like they're using Gmail, and their members had Primo and EDS, Science Direct, and others. And so hopefully you can start to see how we began to map these relationships. Now, this WordPress prototype created a lot of limits, but we wanted to learn what we could on a budget. And so it allowed us to do that. And where we started to break was around the person's profile. We learned that we had to start in a different direction. So we began focusing on organizations and that experience, but we learned that we actually need to start with people, because people make up the organization. And so this is sort of where we stopped by building out the individual's experience on the graph within the linked data model. And that's sort of the furthest that we got. And so I'm excited to, you're actually the second group to see where we're going next. And so you'll notice the change now to SkillType, and I'm going to show you what SkillType is. And so when you log into SkillType as a person and you create your profile, you're able to tell SkillType a lot of information about yourself. And no matter whether you're using it on your desktop or on your mobile, it will still be a beautiful experience. iPad, it doesn't matter. The skills here are coming from our controlled vocabulary, and our partners give us feedback on this. We add new skills, and you can actually add one right in the interface. Perhaps you specialize in creating metadata schemas, and you also are a specialist in organizational design. You like project management as well. And we'll throw in user interface design as well, and we'll update our skills here. Interests, as I mentioned, are the same. And so coming from that same vocabulary, but these are things that you want to learn more about. Perhaps you want to attend conference presentations or see a TED Talk about this topic, or perhaps you want to take a course on lynda.com about this topic. And so this information will give your manager or your team the information they need to know to make recommendations to you. Okay? So same idea here. Say research data management is a new topic on campus, and I want to learn more about it. And so I can add that under my interests here. And the same goes for product experience. And so your product experience grows the more organizations you work for, the more products you use. And we want SkillType to be a place where you can store all this information as you're learning it and have it feed up to your managers and to your organizational view. This is one of the first directions you'll start to notice the difference between SkillType and a service like LinkedIn, where much of what we're doing is going deeper into our niche, as opposed to trying to be sort of an all things to all professions platform. We focus specifically on the information profession. Okay, and so the products and services we have here are going to be very, very specific to the work that you do every day. Such as, say, we even included like the Scholarly Kitchen or Reader's Guide Retrospective, Ex Libris Rosetta. And so these are very specific to the work that you do within your organizations. Okay, and so this is being rolled out next week, and it fits into a broader user experience that every 2 weeks now is unfolding as we speak. I'm going to shift back to the presentation to show you what we're building. And so as people start to create profiles, it fits into this experience. And so when you first log in, you'll have two options to start. You can build your profile, or you can join an organization. You can also search across all of the different objects on SkillType as well. And perhaps you are a manager at your organization, and you want to manage your organization's profile. You'll be able to do that from the menu area here. If you don't have management capability, this won't appear for you. Okay. So another thing you may want to do is update your settings. And so if you click on Settings under Account, I'm showing this to you from the mobile view because it's sort of long vertical for a slide. But in your settings, this isn't just where you're able to update your contact information. This is where you also update your personal demographics as well. And so this has been a popular request from our partners to want to know across our staff, what are the racial demographics? What about sexual orientation, or what about gender, or what about different types of information across our teams that we need to help inform our recruitment strategy, to help inform our collaborative efforts with partners. And so each person is able to manage that information at a personal level, but when you affiliate with an organization, it is shared up to the organizational level. Okay. If you click on join an organization, this is where you can select your organization to affiliate with them, or perhaps they don't exist yet on SkillType and you have to create it from scratch. And so when you click add an organization, it's a simple form you fill out, and you can choose which type of organization it is, because the fields you complete will vary based on the type of organization you are. And so perhaps you're a merged organization, or you're just a traditional IT shop or a library. Maybe you're a vendor. And we're currently recognizing consortial groups or networks as vendors. And this seems like a peculiar word choice here, but the logic behind it is that libraries or IT departments spend money with consortial through a membership fee. And so any organization that you spend money with, we're calling them a vendor, because they are a separate fiscal agent or fiscal entity from that organization. We may change this in the future, but currently that's how we recognize a consortium. Okay, and you can choose your subscription, whether that's monthly or annually. If you do annually, you'll save money. Perhaps you're not ready to pay yet, and if you're not ready to pay, you can still create your profile, but it will just be saved as a draft. And so you'll notice here in red, it'll be draft, and you can still use the service, but it won't be published to everyone to use. So what happens when you create your profile on SkillType as an organization? And so as an organization, as I mentioned, you have affiliations. And these could be consortia you belong to. Perhaps you're a member of the ACRL Diversity Alliance. Perhaps you're a member of your state library association. You also have teams or departments within your institution. This is where you can create those as well. The strategic directions you select for your organization are here. You can edit those, along with products and services that you pay for, that you subscribe to. And the more data you add here for your organization, the different people who affiliate with your organization can self-identify with these pieces of data. So that when you click on a strategic direction, the idea is for you to be able to see across our org chart who all is helping us contribute in working towards this strategic direction, right? When we click on a product, who all has experience, who actually uses this product across our org chart, right? Now, we haven't even started to design what it looks like for a consortium to use this, but some of the ideas that we're playing with are to be able to see this type of information for all of our members. So that if you're as a consortial level, you're evaluating a product or a purchase, you can say, well, of our 80 members across Oberlin, 20 of them use this product, so perhaps we need to reach out to them to lead this evaluation. And so just to be able to have all that data at your fingertips, okay? So I'm gonna stop now. We have about 20 minutes left. Happy to jump to different screens or answer questions and hear from everyone.
So Alexa, do you want to talk a little bit before we dive into, before I start clicking everybody to make them a full participant? Do you want to say a few words about how you got involved in this and what your experience has been so far?
Sure. So I have been in conversation with the former LibDot team now for almost, I guess it's been a year, Tony, in terms of just kind of first their broad conceptualization of this project and now to this really beautiful interface that I'm really very excited about. One of the biggest opportunities among many, I think, for our institutions is to kind of think about skills sharing in a collaborative fashion and to take some of the data that we would typically amalgamate on our listservs and make it into impactful data, right? And so we will often go on our listserv and ask for support or assistance or help. And then, you know, we will often share the findings of said information, but kind of where does that fit also in the big data analytics of our respective institutions? And so whether that's something that we're currently involved in, or it's going to be a future outgrowth going forward as we all think about and re-envision the supposition of liberal arts education. To me, this type of interface really is a fantastic step in the right direction in terms of us really thinking contextually around how data can be shared and how we can leverage each other as a part of the big data supposition. So when Oberlin first jumped into the pilot, it was really truthfully, Mike, because we needed some assistance around a bunch of positions that we had open. The interface was continuing to evolve, but as Tony and I talked and then those conversations cascaded to the team, it became really evident that today's interface is really what we needed. We really needed to be able to see and to go into a site beyond a LinkedIn, beyond standard social media, beyond our own networks, and to be able to tap into different expertise. So even as I was thinking as a new director, it would have been helpful to have this interface as I was developing my job descriptions and kind of thinking from a percentile perspective where skills should map with the current workforce. It would have also been good to have had colleagues that I could have tapped into just to kind of think with me or walk with me through some of those elements. So to me, I think that this new interface really gets to the heart of that, and that's why I'm really excited to see its future growth.
That's great. As people may notice, I'm starting to add people to the panelist list. So Tony, I'm wondering, maybe you could stop sharing your screen, which I think would allow us to see the full Hollywood Squares effect.
Absolutely.
Super, thank you.
You're welcome.
So one thing I guess that I would throw out as a question, and I've had some preliminary conversations with Tony, is the kind of business model around this in terms of what if, as we look at this, trying to think about the what the kind of upfront costs, what the ongoing costs, what the transactional costs might be, just so that people would understand what this might look like from a financial point of view. So could you speak a little bit to your initial thoughts around that?
Absolutely. We think about this every day because we have bills to pay. And so, no, it is a cost. It's not, there's no free lunch. And we've tried to be really thoughtful around how and why and sort of the methodology. And so we are a subscription-based business model where each organization pays a monthly subscription, and there are no contracts sort of locking any organization in. We want to be a part of this new class of software companies that don't grow their business from locking people into unfavorable contracts, but by giving people the option to cancel at any time and having that serve as an accountability mechanism to force us to keep meeting your needs time and time and time and time again through good customer service, through updated features, and so on and so forth. And so the subscription model also allows us to resist the temptation from selling data through an advertising-based model. And so it does a few different things for us sort of philosophically that gives us peace, which is, one, we don't ever want to sell data. That's not, we've seen that go wrong every day. There's more tweets and articles around kind of why that's not the direction of the future. But number two, advertising is not the experience that you have today in your collaborative efforts. So what we want to design through our business model is to take what you do today on listservs and at conferences, in a trusted, secure space, and take that behavior you've already perfected and just make it more efficient. And so there's certain conversations you have where vendors aren't welcome. There's certain conversations you have where other institutions aren't welcome. And so we're trying to think through this from a business model perspective and from a data model perspective. And where we've settled is your organization can pay a subscription fee. And what we're going to roll out is the monthly subscription will be based on the number of staff you have in your organization. And so, Colgate should not be paying the same amount as Harvard. And so, and it also translates to our costs, because the more people we are managing data on behalf of, our costs go up as well. Mm-hmm. And so just for an example, based on our data model, for an organization with 100 staff, we're maintaining about 10,000 data points at any given time. To get to Alexia's point around the big data mandate, if you look across our community, these are millions of data points that we are processing in real time, asynchronously, every time you reload a page. Mm-hmm. And so the cost, the business model will be based on the number of seats that you have within your organization, number one. And number two, transaction costs, which I mentioned to you, Mike, when we had breakfast in Middlebury. When we broker a transaction on your behalf, we have to pay a fee to our payments provider, which is called Stripe. It's a 2.5% fee every time we broker a transaction. And so we're going to charge you a fee to cover that cost. And we're also going to charge a margin on that, like a 3% margin on top of that. So what that means is, say, for instance, you create a project and say, we need an implementation consultant for a new ILS. And we have a member who has someone with experience implementing this product. Well, we want that person to be compensated for their work. And we want your staff members to earn supplemental income. And so what they can do is we'll broker the transaction on your behalf between the members, and we'll charge a fee on top of that. And so this part of our business model is bringing sort of the shared economy or the gig economy to libraries, allowing you to acquire skills that recognize people's worth and value. And that's sort of the other part of our business model. We've also toyed around with individual subscriptions as well, which would be sort of like a Netflix style $7 a month for individuals who are in a season that they want to spend a lot of time investing in their professional development. Some people, and you can turn that off monthly. So that would be a third revenue stream.
There's a question in the chat as well from Andrew.
I can't see it. Hold on one
And
moment.
so the question is, what about starting with consortia at a reduced, I think he says reduced scale, rather than with full Oberlin group? What about CTWs, CBB, tri-colleges, etc.?
Yes, and please. We are not picky. We started the conversation with Mike around the Oberlin group because of its diversity and because of the different types of subgroups and networks within it. We just think it's rich for input and feedback and use cases. We never anticipated at any point for there to be full adoption across the Oberlin membership. We hoped through these conversations we could identify an initial cohort, 5 institutions, 6, who all had sort of the budget and the opportunity and the sense of urgency, perhaps at their institutional levels, to say, hey, we're investing in new infrastructure for collaboration. And perhaps there's a small cohort who has funding and initiatives on campus to justify getting involved at this stage already. And so absolutely, this is the type of conversation we hope to have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, we've talked a little bit about it, but I'm curious to hear a little more, a couple of different, I think they're connected issues. So one is sort of who owns this data? And I'm thinking more of like individuals who might spend time recording their skills and their interests, and then say that they move from one institution to another institution. Does the record about them stay whole? And does it move with them as they move from institution to institution, so that they're not required to go rebuild their profile from scratch? And then the second piece is, there's a part of me that feels like this would be a great sort of poaching engine. So when I'm wanting to hire somebody, if I could look within the personnel files of every Oberlin Group school and find my next library system administrator, I think that would be great. However, I don't want any of my colleagues to use it for that purpose, because I don't want to lose my staff to that that method. So yeah, I'm curious what your, so so it seems to me there's a interesting double-edged sword around using this to find folks, but also worrying about to what extent do you suddenly expose all of the talent in your organization to the rest of the organization. And I'm not sure the both, like, who owns the data, how does it manage as people move, and what thoughts you might have about the politics of poaching.
Yeah, it's a very, very popular question. And we aren't creating any new sort of social behavior that doesn't exist already.
Exactly. Yep.
If you you look within your organizations all the time, the ARL does it as well. In fact, in order to work at another ARL, you pretty much got to work for another ARL. And so it's sort of, that's been around for a long time. That's been the way it's been. And, you know, I think there's that just personal accountability that's there. You're not going to want to be the most hated person in your consortium who just goes around poaching everyone. But you may have a need and an occasion, and we just hope to sort of have that accountability measure take shape. And knowing that that's the case, perhaps you start a conversation with your colleague who runs that other library sooner than later. What we're thinking about is how to make the interview process and the evaluation process of an individual more humane, which is our focus. And so every person, even on this webinar, owns their own data, right? Because none of us are our institution. None of us are going to be at our institutions forever. And so if Alexia creates a profile, or Mike or Steve or John or whoever, you own your profile. You own that data for that profile. And you too have an opportunity to earn supplemental income no matter where you are, even if you're going into retirement, based on your skills and your expertise. And the idea is, instead of someone calling you for 3 hours saying, hey, can I pick your brain on this initiative you have, and you giving all this expertise to someone, it's like, wait, you know, I worked for 20 years to gain this expertise. And in fact, I have an hourly rate. And I'd love to share it with you, but I can either give 3 hours to my organization who's paying me, or you can contract me for a gig. And I'd gladly make time if I'm in a season where I need to earn supplemental income. And so our bias will always be towards representing you as an individual, because organizations have budget to get this expertise. And as we have colleagues who are going into retirement, this is very attractive for them. But also colleagues who are younger in their careers, still paying off student loan debt, and they have to tutor and grade papers. And I've even heard stories of people bartending after they get off of work at the library because the cost of living where they are isn't matched with their salary. And so our philosophy and bias will always be towards the individual. which speaks to the data ownership model as well. When you create your profile, we actually encourage you to create it with your personal email address, because that will persist regardless of your place of employment. You can then request an affiliation with your organization. Mm-hmm. And by virtue of you opting in to sharing your data with your employer, you're doing that for the benefits you receive through sharing that. And so we want to create a culture of painting organizations in a positive light. When I affiliate with Oberlin, I'm sharing data with them that will benefit me. In other words, if my managers know what I'm interested in, they can better recommend conferences for me to go to. Or I now can, even though I'm an introvert, I now can get travel budget allocated to me that I may not have gotten because I'm not all that vocal in our staff meetings, right? And so now my organization doesn't have an excuse to give travel budget to the loud people all the time. Everyone can see who's interested across our teams, and we can distribute that budget more equitably.
And I will also add that both network science and phenomenology suggest that these practices already take place. What I believe that this tool allows to have happen is a democratized process in which that we are sharing skill sets and knowledge in a way that is easy for particularly those of us who are at the director level or even in shared organizations to drill into rather quickly. So rather than there being the action step of having to put a message out on the listserv or to try to caucus with colleagues at a particular conference, we can go into this interface and see automatically who has a particular set of skills that may be valuable to us as we're going through different cycles within our institutions. The other thing is that for me, and Tony touched on this, but I wanted to further illuminate the idea of long-term skill set planning. And the ways in which that message can then be shepherded to the senior administration level, I think is important. I think that still we are facing a lot of stereotypical supposition around the work of libraries. And so to be able to share an interface such as this, which richly demonstrates the complexity of our work and the ways in which senior administration then subsequently needs to invest in it financially and through other resources, I think is going to matter. There's another piece that I think is important for us to think about for a future conversation is this intersection between IT, libraries, and offices of research. That's definitely happening at Oberlin. So while our organizations are not merging, there's definitely more collaboration that's taking place. And I think that as a result of us just talking more openly around the complexity of the skill sets that reside within the quote unquote library, it has given many people a different viewpoint in the ways in which they can deepen collaborations with us towards advancing student success.
Yeah, you remind me of a project Wayne State is rolling out, and they're designing this project with SkillType as the infrastructure through a consortium that's hosted at Wayne State called DullNet. The Detroit Area Library Network. It's like 18 institutions across the Detroit area. And across those members, they have a lot of part-time staff. And it's hard for a part-time staff member to gain full-time meaningful employment. But through SkillType, it doesn't exist today, but what we're designing with them that I think would be a benefit even to you is a model where you can look at two part-time opportunities at two different member institutions, but allow that single person to be made whole, to have full-time employment through two institutions, and to be able to look at not just your faculty, but also your staff members, and to put them on a path towards professional development and career development and growth. And so these types of models, we want to be able to support, not just part-time, but there's a variety of alternative modes of employment, I'll call it, that we can investigate to meet our short-term and long-term needs.
Thank you.
I am aware of the time. I know a number of you said that your days were packed and needing to race off to the next meeting. So I want to sort of call this to an end, but I can hang around. And Tony, if you can hang around, we can stay after for further questions. I'm also going to propose the last session at the Overland Group meeting in a couple of weeks is somewhat unscheduled, somewhat on purpose. And so I'm also hoping that we might form a little discussion group just to talk a little bit more about what we've learned today and how we might respond to this interesting idea. So with that, I'm going to turn off the recording. I'll hang around. Tony, if you've got a moment, we can hang around, and then we can, and for those of you who are leaving, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes, thank you. And I'll talk to you both soon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Alexia. Thanks, everyone. I'm still here, Mike.
Okay.